So let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors, and I have come to a surprising conclusion today. I've come to the conclusion that in almost every case, secrets in tabletop RPGs are not good. And we're going to do a lot of clarifying and specifying throughout this video because in some cases, rare cases, they're great. But I just want to start off by saying I'm a game master who has ruined a lot of games by using the wrong kind of secrets at the wrong times. And what it has done is caused confusion. It has broken player trust. And it has made the game sort of crumble. And so when I was planning a campaign today, I kind of went back to my old ways of the secrets and what to reveal and what are the reveals. I love reveals. I love them probably too much. And I tried to think of why I love reveals. And then I started thinking, why are they bad? And Jeff actually pegged it in a conversation we were having right before we recorded this. In a tabletop RPG, we're all co-writers to a degree. The game master is the head producer. He's or she's the one who kind of make the final call. But in the writer's room of the tabletop RPG, if I have a piece of information that I'm hiding from everyone, that can be really bad to just spring on everyone because it goes against the collaborative, cooperative nature of what we're all here to do. And I think that finally hit it on the head for me, Jeff. And so thank you for that. So I want to explore in the rest of this video, like what kind of secrets are good, and then just kind of talking through this epiphany that I've had that I'm really glad that I had. Now, to be specific, when I say a secret, I don't mean that you have to tell the players everything. There should be surprises. But specifically, what I mean as a secret is something that is outside the boundaries of what you've decided the game is going to be about in your session 0, or the things that you've all agreed upon in terms of tone and theme and style, a drastic departure from what is expected and accepted within the bounds of what you decide. That is what I'm considering a secret. And I wanted to set that up real early and say, there should be surprises. But let's talk about secrets.
Yeah, it's actually something that I've kind of noticed too about a lot of games, that the games that I tend to, appreciate the most are the ones that are the most direct about what the game is kind of supposed to be about. And one of the reasons is exactly what you said, is that when you know kind of what the purpose, what kind of the end goal of the game is going to be, free of any, grand dramatic twists, it gives you as a player the opportunity to really tailor your character and their reactions to the game as it's going to unfold. So if you know the game is supposed to go in a certain direction, you can build a character with a backstory that matches the destination, or goals and conflicts that really mesh with the sort of main tension point. And you can build yourself into a way so that when you get to those big dramatic points, you have things ready as a player that you can then respond to and react to and tie in of like, okay, now that we're in this big moment, I can use this cool backstory thing that I wrote because I knew that we were getting here. Where if the GM is just dropping total surprise bombs and totally changing up the campaign halfway through with this big twist, you may have built your character to work really well with what you thought the game was going to be, and then suddenly everything, boom, switches on a dime because the GM wanted to hit you with a big twist, a big surprise. And then suddenly you might find that your character doesn't really fit as well as you thought they might. Or you might have, wanted to have a certain sort of reaction prepared for a big moment, but now you're denied that opportunity because the GM never even gave you a chance to be ready for it. And I found, very similar things. That's just the more, I think, as a player, you can be in tune with what's going on in the game. Now, obviously, the GM doesn't have to tell exactly what the plot's going to be point by point across the entirety of the game. It's okay to leave something to the imagination. But in terms of kind of the big things that the game is going to centralize on, I think it's better as a player to know what you're getting into so that you can properly prepare for those moments, and you can really make them special and have built up connections and reasons for the scene to matter. Where I think sometimes if it's just a total surprise dropped completely out of nowhere, it can kind of catch you off guard as a player. Like, wait, what? Like, why am I supposed to care about this? Like, how does this relate to what we were doing as a group? And you can kind of, I think, lose a lot of the power that big moments in tabletop games can have, because no one knows what to do with them if they're completely caught off guard by them in the moment.
The interesting thing about this that I feel is a little bit unintuitive, you know, Tim, you mentioned that this is something you kind of keep falling into when you were prepping. This is a problem you were finding yourself going back to. I feel like it's one of the very few things that doesn't translate the way a lot of other narrative elements translate from things like movies and television. In a movie, you know, you're watching it and you see the characters, and the writers and the director, everybody that worked on the movie is feeding you the things you need to know for, you know, if it's that kind of movie, the thing later to matter. If you were to find out what the end of the movie was first, sort of a spoiler at the end, it wouldn't mean anything to you if you didn't know all the foreshadowing before. The problem with that is, in a movie, it's crafted very specifically and fed to you very specifically. But like you guys are talking about, in this case, the players and the GM are all writing the story, that co-writer idea. So without giving your players the ability to build in their own foreshadowing, sort of for lack of a better phrase, you are robbing them of something. And to some degree, even if the reveal lands, right, even if it's cool and it's not a out of left field, or it's not something you guys didn't talk about, it gives it so much more weight if the players are involved in it. Now, that's the other important thing, separating the players from the characters in this sense. I've played in campaigns where I know something, the player knows something about another player or something in the world or some big thing, but my character doesn't. Obviously, that can be a touchy subject that we could make a whole video about, but the idea is, by giving them that, you get to set up, in this case, I'm going to use a tragedy. You get to set up that tragedy, that maybe your player makes a decision that they had information that was crucial to them that will matter in the reveal, they would have made a completely different decision. That is something you get to look back on in your session and go, oh man, if only I had gone left instead of right, we would have avoided this whole thing, but I just didn't know. That gives the reveal later so much more weight than telling them after the fact, if only you had gone left, and you go, you mean you based this whole thing on a coin toss? Well, not really, but that's what the player remembers. So specifically, like I said, it's important to remember that if you find yourself falling into that, I think that that's why that happens, but that it's one of the few cases that it's dangerous to make a decision and roll with it without involving your players, even if you're not involving the player characters specifically.
And there's more than one sort of secret that all this can apply to as well. We've been kind of talking about like plot secrets where the GM is dropping like a big paradigm shift in the way that the game is happening. But these sorts of things can cause problems on much smaller scales too that I've seen. A big one that I've seen that has caused a lot of problems in games that I've been a part of before is GMs and players who will basically pass notes between each other to make sure that information stays like secreted away from other players. So for example, one player sneaks off to go, see what's in a box first, and they open the box and see that there's, a cool magic item in it or something. And rather than the GM saying to the table, hey, this is what you find in this box, they'll message that player what they found and leave it up to them if they even want to tell the other party or not, what they found. And then suddenly 3 sessions later, they come out with this like amazing, cool magic item. And everyone's like, wait, where did you even get that? What happened? I think those sorts of secrets too, where it's, players keeping things from each other and the GM sort of helping to facilitate that. For some tables, that might be okay if you like that sort of antagonistic, every man for himself play style. But I think for most people, the way that they're going to play the game is that sort of thing is going to really hinder sort of player-to-player trust and sort of investment in the group rather than kind of yourself as an individual, where, if you find a cool, magic item before anyone else, or if you hear a cool secret that nobody else would have gotten to hear, knowing those things as players can be super exciting, even if as a character you don't get to act on that information. Just, for one, it helps just to keep all the players on the same page so that there's not that level of sort of antagonistic, distrust between each other of like, do I have to race towards every bit of loot because if the rogue gets there first and he takes it, I might not even know that it was there to begin with, and he's going to have all this cool stuff and I'm not. It cuts down on things like that to have everybody sort of communally discuss those sorts of events. And two, even if as a character you don't have that information as a player, knowing that sort of thing, it can help you to sort of react in the moment when you finally do have those things come to light. So that way you're not sort of caught flat-footed, in that moment when you finally do discover that the rogue had stolen something before you could get there. As a player, you've kind of already gotten to decide, like, okay, this is kind of how my character is going to respond when he finds out. To kind of use James' analogy to a movie, rather than kind of like watching the movie and seeing what happens, try to imagine like if you were an actor in a movie and you didn't know what lines you were supposed to say because it was a secret. Like you kind of need to know how, your responses are going to be to some of these situations. And just having everybody be in on it can be a great way to, for one, prepare yourself for when you do get those big information drops and know, like as a character, if you want to have like a cooler speech or, a really cool reaction or something like that ahead of time, you can have that. And additionally, it kind of just, for me at least, builds a much more sort of bonded table environment where everyone is trying to do the coolest thing for the story rather than what they can get away with for their own character to make themselves cool. And I think that just that shift in table perception can go a long way, even if the game itself isn't necessarily changing.
So let's talk about secrets and twists handled in a way that are productive and that come out as very beneficial to the story and not something that seems like either a dagger to the story or the old cartoon railroad crossing that shoots you in another direction. Because the right kind of information withheld is tension, and the right kind of details that are shifted can make some of the best stories. So what are those lines? And that's what we want to explore here. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm facing right now as I plan a campaign that I'm trying to decide what to keep secret and what not to keep secret. And then we're also going to talk at the very end about some secrets and some twists in games that we've played in that we loved, and maybe kind of explore why we love them and why they work. So right now, I'm planning a campaign in the campaign setting of Dragon Grin that we've created. The big bad can sort of see forward in time, and that's one of the big benefits that he has. So I have this rebel organization, and this is where I haven't told any of the players this particular part. I have this rebel organization who I want to be able to do what the bad guy's doing by finding this device or maybe this specific thing so that they can also see into the future, and that's their mission. So if the bad guy can see into the future to keep himself alive and to make a specific timeline that's perfect, I thought it'd be really interesting to have the good guys have a sort of downgraded version of that to be able to push through, and they can see the eventual timeline where the bad guy loses. And are you guys tracking with me so far? Is that all clear? So in my mind, I thought, I'm going to keep it a secret what they're doing. They're not going to know that if the bad guy can see all their timelines, the secret is that they're actually doing all these missions that they won't know, and they're kind of, and then I'll do this big reveal where they all realize that they've been working together to push the exact timeline where the big bad loses. And I thought, but what? Wait, that would make all of the things that they did, and Jeff, you hit it on the head. I feel like they'd be like, oh, if I knew that, I was going to betray this person, and I would have said this, and it would be like robbing them. So how much of what I just told you would you tell the players, and how would you tell it? Do you guys have any ideas? Because I also have one more thing I'm going to mention after that. That is, I think I figured out how to do things secretively that pay off. But go ahead. So how would you tell that information? Or would you keep any of that from them?
So I'd probably be pretty forthright about all that, to be honest. For one, I think it's just cool to be in the know about that sort of thing. And for one, as a character in the world, it adds more sort of trust as to why you'd go along with this sort of thing. If they just say, we're this shadowy organization, do what we say, do these missions and we'll do, whatever, it gives a lot more opportunity for them to be like, okay, well, why should we do this? Why don't we just go do anything else? Well, that's a pretty good reason as to why they should follow your story, for one, which is useful. And two, again, it gives them, I think, a lot of opportunity, like you say, to then, if you only tell them that after the fact, you've kind of, basically, in a sense, I know this is not what you're trying to do, so don't take this the wrong way.
Sure, no, go for it. Yeah.
It basically is saying, like, all the things you did didn't matter because it was all, like, preordained and planned by me, the person who's the real cool guy. Like, it makes the story about you and what you're making rather than what the players are doing and what the players want to make as the group. But if you tell them that in advance, then they kind of get to be in on the joke, when that finally drops. And they get to help come up with these plans and help come up with these reasons. And, do they actually want to follow this timeline? Or maybe they spot a flaw in that timeline and they want to subvert that and mess them up. There's so many decisions that they get as a group knowing that that's what they're doing. And so many basically, and it centers the story around them and what they want to do with that information rather than you as the GM basically telling them what to do and then telling them that it was all your idea, in the end anyways. It's just, I think as a player, for me, that's the thing that matters a lot to me, is that, like, the decisions that I'm making in the game are impacting the world in ways that only happen because we did them. And I think for me, I think that having that be a surprise would take away from that, because it's like, oh, well, we were just doing this because it was the plan rather than, like, agency that we've expressed. But if I know the plan and I'm choosing to follow it, suddenly that's very different. Even if the end result is, like, technically the same, like, it feels a lot more involved and like I got to make decisions that matter. And then I get to, like, make my character in such a way that, like, maybe part of my backstory is that I've seen in this vision of the future that something terrible happens to me or a family member in the future in this timeline. Even though it's better for the good guys, something really bad happens to someone I care about. I get to now build that moment into this game, and we get to explore that as the game master and the player. Like, what happens when we finally get to that moment? And I know someone I care about is going to die, and I can save them or I can follow the plan. That's an awesome decision to have to make as a character. And knowing that I get to do that and building my character to do that gives, I think, so much more opportunity for, like, cool moments and tie-ins and agency and expression. And they don't get any of those things if they don't know what the deal is. So I'd say tell them, at the very least, tell them that premise. Even if they don't know exactly what courses of action will lead to exactly what timeline. And, you don't have to tell them that. And there's probably good reasons for the rebel organization not to give away all the secrets of exactly what they're trying to do. But giving the players opportunities, even if the characters aren't going to know every detail, the players should kind of know what the gist is so they can do all those cool things.
Another thing I wanted to throw in based on all of that and sort of remind you of, and this is something movies do, avoiding spoilers as much as possible. At some point in a recent movie, Doctor Strange says, there's a million ways this could go and we only win in one. But so many other things happen that I personally, and I think a lot of people, forget that in the context of everything. So you almost get a second reveal where, like you said, Jeff, oh, this person has to die. If you do this over sessions, I think yours is going to be like one session, Tim, but even in that, like, if you tell the players at the beginning as they're playing, it's not going to be the thing at the top of their mind every moment, every decision they make. So it gets more fun when they get really into it. Their family member dies and that was a really heartfelt scene. And later you get to toss in, hey, but don't forget that had to happen. You get sort of a second layer reveal that's like that involved everybody, even though they didn't plan it, especially in the case of something like this. So I agree with Jeff, where I think kind of telling them a lot of that will really make some really cool moments.
Yeah, and so I think I might have come up with sort of the balance, at least a way to quantify the balance. I'm going to bounce it off you guys, and you tell me what you think about, is if you give them the general idea of what, you can really mess around with how. And maybe that's the secret sauce, is I just gave you that premise. But now, if I really go nuts with exactly how it happens or the ramifications of how it happens, that can be the weird part, right? So if I tell you that, now I don't tell you that by doing this, as you say, Jeff, the twist is I know for sure that the higher ups in the Undying Light, that rebel organization, they for sure know that one entire region is going to be obliterated. That is a really fine reveal because everyone's in on it and they know how important things are. But if I were to, so the how also could be like, oh, well, to do this, we're actually going to have to take some other people's memories as they work for us. We're not going to tell them, but you're going to actually sacrifice some of your days to power this machine. And we're going to tell you that it's something else. And it's this weird, those kind of things all fit under the umbrella of what is happening. There's no confusion. The how is the levers that you can kind of mess with. And I think flip that around. What if I didn't tell you the what? And all of a sudden I'm like, and then this whole region is gone. You're like, oh, what? What are you talking about? Or if I'm like, and you have memories missing. You're like, I have what do you mean? So if you give the what is happening, at least broad strokes, you can really get fancy with how and why and those kind of things. How does that hit you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds great. I mean, I think something you hit on at the end there that I think is really important, not just for secrets, but just across anything storytelling, in general, but also about secrets, is that when it comes to stories, we care about moments because we've become invested in them. We have reasons to care about what's happening to the people who are on screen or in the game or whatever. And if you don't give enough information to sort of set up why we should care, then when you get to the big moment, like you say, no one's going to care. Just suddenly out of nowhere, it's like, this entire region's gone. Like, the response is probably going to be like, oh, that's kind of crazy. And that'll be it. Like, cool. But if it's been this whole thing where they've been invested, they've been like seeing this timeline build up, they know kind of exactly the events that are going, but they haven't been told this other stuff, and suddenly they've agreed to go along with this plan and they've been following it through. And then suddenly they get to that big pinnacle moment where they realize that by their own actions, they've caused this entire region to fall in because they were following the plan that they only kind of knew. Suddenly that's a lot more impactful of like, oh, that region is gone because of us. We did that. And like those lives are in a sense, on our hands. Is that okay? Do we want to keep following this plan? Is this too much? Is this going to turn us off the plan? Because now we know exactly kind of what we're throwing away to do this, because you've let them sort of know what's happening, they can kind of grow attached to what's happening and find reasons to care about what's happening. Again, it gives the one point that I'm going to come back to a lot in this part of the conversation is it makes it about the players and what they're doing, because you've given them a chance to act and decide. And even if they don't have all the information and that leads to them making some questionable decisions, that's, I think, a lot more interesting than surprise, a big, explosion happened, rather than like this explosion happened because you did this. And now you know that this thing that you've agreed to is perhaps more nefarious than you thought, is way more interesting than a surprising thing happened out of nowhere. So yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah, and this is a little more specific to your situation, but something that I feel it bears mentioning that I think kind of sums up part of what Jeff is talking about. In a sense, in every movie I've seen where you as the watcher know something like, oh, no matter what they do, it's going to end up being the grand plan, especially in a game like an RPG, you get a little bit of a mind game where, because you are writing the story as you go, because it's a role-playing game, you kind of get a fun thing where you get to decide that as you go, where whatever happens, you've kind of already told them is going to culminate in being what had to happen, right? So it does create a little bit of a fun mind game where, oh, well, does my loved one have to die? You know what I mean? Maybe you can make some of those things have to happen, and they get to build the story around it. I don't know. It will create a fun situation where the players are thinking about their decisions differently because they know what some of the outcomes will be, even though they don't know what the decisions are yet. And I think just in general, that will make for really good stories after the fact, because you let them in on the secret instead of making it a secret and then telling them that at the end.
Exactly. And so just to kind of to round it off, I think I have a really good direction that I'm going to take. And exactly what you're saying, I'm going to make it very clear what we're doing and how we're doing it, because then the players can weave it into their backstories. And even I will encourage them to think of things that might be ramifications and how will your involvement in this plan, what would it cost you, and kind of even make a short list of inspirational questions so that they can really invest themselves. And then as it goes through, what that allows, if everybody's in on it, you can also have other players tie in their thing to another player's thing. So if it was totally a secret, like you said, we've talked about it, we said a few times, it would rob everyone of the opportunity. To take that to the absolute converse, if everyone is in on it, it positively nets multiple opportunities for other people to interact with each other. So now, if my piece to this puzzle is I have nothing really to live for, I'm an old veteran, I feel like I've run my course, my character arc is that I was in this battle and I finally found my sort of redemption, I could ask the game master, hey, is it cool if we can figure out some way for me to take the place of their loved one? And then it's like, well, that's an interesting idea. Let me think about it. And now you have two player stories that are really powerful, and they start to sort of coalesce and almost exponentially become more weighty. Because now you have this person who sacrifices themselves in place of their family somehow. And it could be, oh, well, they have to do something gnarly and go in this crazy timeline, and it costs them a lot. But then that player's arc is they get full redemption, and the other player's arc is that they don't lose the thing that's most dear to them. That's a cool story. Neither of which could even begin to have happened if at the end I'm like, oh yeah, guess what, guys? Pew, 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 pew. That's how I game master. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, I think that I'm in a really good place with this. I think secrets can be awesome when it's not about revealing them, and it's more about the meta knowledge of them, and then the inner workings of them can be manipulated and shifted as the game goes on. So, I want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Do you use secrets in your games? Have they been beneficial? Have they been hurtful? Is your table the kind of table that loves to keep interplayer secrets between the game master and the players? Does it work for you? There is no one true way, and I would love, and these guys would love to hear how you do it. What's your take on secrets? If you like these sorts of videos, we're Tabletop Terrors. We're all about fun, creativity, and of course, tabletop games. Consider subscribing, liking this video, and we'd love to hear from you. So, as usual, let's finish this with a Tabtarian toast.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
What I didn't tell you guys is that what you're actually doing... No, I'm kidding.
Your drinks are all poisoned!
That's murder. I was in a game. I was a game master of a game, and we played for like 5 sessions, and then at the very last session, I tried to do this awful reveal. It wasn't awful to me at the time. it was this crazy time travel weirdness of this person isn't really this person, and it's been this person the whole time, and it fell so hard on its face that we stopped playing after that for like a year. And I'm not saying that's why. No one explicitly said that, but looking back, that's why.
There were a lot of factors. That was one of the main factors. I was going to say, I think the other problem with your reveals is every time you say a big secret, you're doing finger guns and saying pew, pew, pew. Maybe that's not the way to handle it.
Maybe it is, though. Maybe that's the one part we keep.